Welcome back to On the Move with Victor Shi. This is still Victor Shin. We are coming to you live on Thursday, December 8th. This has felt like a very long week. We had an election day on Tuesday. There is so much news of the day, and every day it feels like there is so much news happening regarding the former president, or should I say the former twice impeached disgraced president, and it only seems to be getting worse. This week there are new developments regarding the Trump Organization and this suit out in New York, and the Mar-a-Lago documents case with new documents. Yes, I said new documents being found in a storage room in West Palm Beach by a lawyer who Trump hired. And so today we're going to dive into those two issues. And then after that, we're going to get into some of the news of the day. There's a lot that's going on. And so definitely want you all to be informed about the news that's happening around us, because I think it's so important and so critical for us to understand. So we're going to dive deep into everything you need to know about Trump, how much doom he is in, and with the one and only Jen Taub. She is a professor of law at Western New England Law School and the host of the brand new podcast called Booked Up with Jen Taub. And I saw her earlier this week, and so it's great to see you again. Hi, Jen.
Hey, Victor. Good morning.
It's so great to see you. So let's dive right in, because earlier this week, Jill and I talked to you about the case against the Trump Organization. And on Tuesday, we found out that the Trump Corporation and the Trump Payroll Corporation were found guilty on all charges and could be facing $1.61 million in fines, I heard. Tell us what this case means and how we got to this point before we dive into some of the specifics.
Thanks. Yeah. So, what folks maybe don't know is even though our conversation aired on Tuesday, we had
Yeah,
actually recorded it the day before at
right.
the time the jury had gone home for the evening. And Jill and I were having a bit of a debate about what would happen, what the jury would decide. And it really did come down to one of the elements there. And so, what they were looking at was whether you could convict these two corporations based on the actions of a high managerial agent, on the actions of this CFO. And
Mhm.
it really depended upon whether Weisselberg was this high managerial agent, which he was. He was given, complete control over, or he had access to, and his job responsibilities included the finances. Then you had to decide, with even if you had that very important role, was he acting within the course of his employment responsibilities, which seemed like a no-brainer. So it was the third prong that needed to be proven beyond a reasonable doubt, which was, did Weisselberg as CFO act not just to benefit himself personally by making these under the table payments, but was he benefiting these corporations?
Mhm.
And the jury didn't have really a hard time deciding. It was like a day and a half of deliberations, and midday Tuesday they said yes, and
Yeah.
found these corporations guilty, altogether 17 counts divided between the two of them. Now, you said, Victor, 6 million, or one
6
point.
million, yeah.
Yeah, and to me and you, that would change our lives if someone gave us 1.6
Oh,
million.
yeah,
But that is
yeah,
like not even a rounding error for
yeah.
a giant business like this. So, and notably, Donald Trump himself wasn't convicted. So some folks may sort of feel like, well, what's the big deal? This is a show trial, doesn't mean anything,
Mhm,
but it
mhm.
means a lot. It really means a lot.
So, one of the things I remember us talking about on Monday is that this particular case was against the corporation, not an individual. I'm wondering, just for those who haven't been to law school or aren't kind of steeped in the kind of legal process, how much harder is it to find an entire company guilty rather than just an individual? And how concerned do you think Trump should be about this verdict, even though he wasn't personally implicated in it?
Well, Victor, you could consider going to law school,
Yes.
when you're done, if when the strike is over and you're back in school and you
Yep.
graduate, et cetera. But yeah, it is, it sometimes can be difficult to find a corporation guilty. Ironically, though, especially during the Trump era and during periods when the Justice Department went light on white collar crime, we found often that corporations would either be found guilty or enter a guilty plea, like a so-called deferred prosecution, and no executives would be charged. So it's more common to let the head honcho walk free and
Mm.
convict the corporation. So this notion of enterprise liability, whether it's a corporation, a partnership, or other kind of business entity, that has been found legitimate, at least from a from a constitutional basis since the early 20th century. And there was a question way back when, in the 1900s, whether one of these big railroad companies could be found guilty of violating the Elkins Act, which had to do with deviating from you were required deviating from the official published rates. I know this is getting into the weeds, but it's pretty interesting that there was this law trying to protect businesses from monopolization. So it involved like a sugar shipper that what these big railroad companies would do is they would give preferential rates to the monopolies, because the monopolies would have power, and they would say, give us the best rates in shipping. And then the biggest sugar companies would be able to charge their customers lower rates because the cost of transport was low, and it would further their monopoly. So Congress passed this law saying, no, railroads, you need to publish your rates and stick to your rates. Well, of course, there was a big incentive in still giving those discounts. And so in this case, this guy, Pomeroy, who was the traffic manager for the railroad company, would pretend to charge the real rates, but then give kickbacks to the big sugar companies. And so he was convicted. And the question was whether the railroad company could be. And they took it all the way up to the Supreme Court, arguing that it was not fair to the shareholders. It violated their due process rights because they didn't get their day in court and so on. And the Supreme Court said no, and recognized that under the Constitution, an authorized agent acting in the scope of their authority could be, could result in imputing that behavior, vicarious criminal liability to the entity. And then that's the constitutional possibility. And then individual states can tighten up on that. But that's there. It's available, and it's been available for more than a century.
That's very interesting. So this isn't the only case in New York against Trump. What does this mean for the other ongoing investigations into Trump by, for example, the New York Attorney General Letitia James, or even the ongoing investigations by Manhattan DA Alvin Bragg? Does it impact them in any way?
Yes. Because there's nothing, you think about empirical proof. Like, you can only guess what a jury is going to do. This is the very first time, not just that Donald Trump's businesses have been charged with any crimes, but also convicted. And it's the very first time, I know you've said this, that any president has had their businesses face criminal liability and actually a verdict against them. So this way, we've never seen before, 12 people actually show that no one is above the law, not even the businesses operated by a sitting president. Because even though he said he wasn't operating them, we know his sons, and, via a trust, he was still benefiting from these businesses and never really has lost beneficial ownership of them. So we're talking about a former president's businesses being found guilty. So if a jury was willing to do that, even when hearing that Donald himself was involved, signed these checks, that he was heavily involved in this, if they're willing to do that, this gives so much more confidence, I think, to Alvin Bragg and the other investigations, and to anybody, because it's more that if this case had been lost, I would have been very distressed, because if this case had been lost against these businesses, it would send a signal that it might be very difficult to hold Donald Trump, the man, not the businesses, accountable in a criminal court as well.
Well, that's really good to hear. And it always shocks me that this is someone who is running for president still, and he still maintains some sort of a legitimacy, which is so, I think, sad and an indication of where we are politically in these times. But let's shift to the Mar-a-Lago documents case, because yesterday the Washington Post broke a story about how new documents were found by a lawyer that Trump hired. First of all, why was it the lawyer who found these documents?
There's a judge out of D.C., federal judge, overseeing these searches, or sort of generally, even though we had that magistrate down in Florida who signed off on the search warrant. And so that judge said, listen, these documents keep turning up. I don't want to play any games anymore. I want you lawyers, the current lawyers, not any of the past lawyers who are now in trouble because they didn't fully comply, it seems. Saying, and I say in trouble, maybe not criminal trouble, because there were the way these statements were signed indicated they were, to their best of their knowledge, there had been a search. Well, now the judge sort of wanted no more passive voice, no best of your knowledge. I want you to go make it happen, search wherever you think documents could be, and report back to me. So they did the search, and they said, oops, there's this storage unit. Whoopsie, our bad. There are documents with classified markings there.
Do you
Not a good look for anybody involved in this.
No, not at all. I mean, do you think the former lawyers, who said, to the best of my knowledge, who used passive voice, do you think they should be held accountable in any way? Is that at all possible, or no?
It- I think I would need to know more about, it depends which of the lawyers we're talking about.
Mm,
But, some of them, I think we need to know more about what they knew and when they knew it. And if I'm less concerned with the lawyer who signed off on the affidavit saying to the best, there was a search, and to the best of my knowledge, this is what I was told. She may have enough wiggle room. It's the ones who told her to sign that, and
mm,
who may have direct knowledge, who may themselves be involved in an obstruction charge. So I think we just need to know so much more
yeah.
about what went down there.
I think Barbara Quaid had a great just reaction to this on Twitter yesterday. She just said, "Are you kidding me? How many more classified documents are there?" And I mean, I think that's a legitimate question. Do you think that we should be searching, or not, maybe not we, but the Department of Justice should be searching other properties that Trump owns for classified documents?
Apparently in this case, it wasn't the Department of Justice, right? It was
Right.
the
Yeah.
judge asking the lawyers to do it. And in order for the FBI to, have a search warrant, they have to have probable cause that there are documents in other places. And so I'm sure that if they have
Mm,
that, they will. At this point, I wouldn't doubt that there are not just documents with classified markings, but there's
yeah.
evidence of other criminal behavior, all kinds of places,
Hmm.
unfortunately.
Well, we'll see. So let's turn to one last subject, which is January 6th, and what they plan to do in these final few weeks before the new Congress takes over. Yesterday, they announced that they are considering a criminal referral for Trump, and that they'll come out with a final report the week of December 19th, which is the week right before Christmas. What do you think that we should be paying attention to? I know you follow this case very, very closely, and this committee's work. Walk us through what we should be paying attention to with that final report.
Yeah, I'm less interested in the fact that they're making criminal referrals, in that way back, for example, during the 2008 financial crisis, there was a Senate committee, the Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations, that
Yeah.
made criminal referrals related to banks and so on, and didn't pan out. So it's really up to the Justice Department to decide to charge. So what I will be looking for in the report is the factual foundation for their
Mhm.
analysis under the statutes that they have set out, um, looking toward, Donald Trump's potential guilt. And I think the statutes that I'm most interested in, the ones are the same ones that Elmer Stewart Rhodes was convicted
Oh,
under.
yeah.
Right. So it's the seditious conspiracy statutes, it's the obstruction of a congressional proceeding, and so on. I'm also, we talk about it because it's been named the January 6th Special Committee, but I'm
Mhm.
curious how much more broad they go than the day itself, and whether they're going to be
Hmm.
bringing in
Yeah.
to that report the activities around, around Georgia, finding the votes, or the activities to pressure people in the states to come up with the fake slates of electors. I'm looking at the scope of this,
Mhm.
and then finally, I'm looking at whether the report links Donald Trump to these various threads of insurrectionists who've already been convicted. Like, what's the linkage there between those activities? So I'm quite interested in, just the facts. And you mentioned it's coming out the 19th, and the week of the 19th, and I'm really hoping it happens early in the day on the 19th,
Yeah,
because,
yeah.
as you know, Mary Trump is doing a live show in
Yes,
California, and I'll
yes.
be there. And I'm just trying to figure out how the heck I can get a copy of that, maybe even embargoed, before we go live. Otherwise, I'm going to be reading it on stage from my phone.
Yeah. Honestly, that would be a great that would be a great addition of Mary Trump, just to read the
Just like, leave me
report.
alone. This is what I do. I'll be like on my phone.
Well, I'm so sad. I mean, everyone should go to the Mary Trump show if you're in LA. I would have gone the first time, but Mary had bronchitis, and I'll be back home in Chicago for winter break.
Oh,
But hopefully, there's a second time that you'll all be back in LA, and we can all get together, because I was really excited for that. But I know it'll be a great time, and even if it's you reading the report on stage, it'll be joy.
oh, I hope so. Thank you so much.
So, one last question for you: what is your guess on when Trump will be indicted?
Oof. Sometime. So I'm gonna take a stab at it to say I believe he'll be indicted, and I believe he'll be indicted at the federal level
Mm.
and possibly even by the Manhattan DA.
Oh.
I think the feds are going to go first. I certainly hope Garland does that. I think it would be an embarrassment forever, for a lifetime,
Mhm.
to allow a local prosecutor to indict him before the DOJ does. So I don't know. I'm thinking sometime in January.
Hmm. Well, we will all be paying attention. And Jen Taub, thank you so much for coming on the move. And I encourage all of our listeners and viewers to go check out Jen's new podcast, Booked Up with Jen Taub. Her first guest was Dahlia Lithwick, and it's such a wonderful podcast. Go check that out. Thank you again, Jen, for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Victor.
Of course. Okay, well, that was such an exciting episode. So much news against the former president. Let's talk about some of the news of the day. This morning, we got some new, I guess, revelations or developments regarding the Brittany Griner situation in Russia. She was detained in Russia for 293 days, and President Biden this morning announced that she is coming home, which should bring us all such relief and joy. And I know how many, hardworking people there were in the administration, also outside of the administration, whether it be basketball players or just former, basketball players or athletes, making sure that Brittany Griner deserves the attention that she needs to make sure that she can come back safely. And so this was such a great kind of just development in this case. She'll be back home with her family before Christmas, and it's I think should bring us all joy. Someone who leads with compassion and empathy. President Biden, this administration got it done, and I'm very, very relieved. Yesterday, I know we talked to Neil deGrasse Tyson, so we couldn't unpack Georgia, but I cannot go out without saying about how important Georgia was. And this election, it was such an important election. Raphael Warnock won that state, and it is such a good development for all of us, and great news for democracy, great news for the Senate that will now have 51 Democrats, 49 Republicans, and every committee will now be controlled by a majority of Democrats, which is such, I think, good news for all of us, and we should be really relieved. And then next is going to be 2024. It's going to be a really crazy, I think, election for all of us, and get some rest. We all need that time to recharge, and then we're going to come back and fight even harder in 2024 because the threats to democracy still continue. In that vein, Paul Gosar yesterday released a tweet and then deleted it afterward because the tweet read, I support and agree with the former president. Of course, that's referring to the former president's call to terminate the U.S. Constitution. And while it's deleted, I don't want anyone to forget just how bad that tweet was, and the fact that this is a Republican saying that he supports and agrees with the former president to terminate the U.S. Constitution. And so it should concern all of us. There are Republican elected officials all across the country who are steeped in these extremist beliefs, and I think that we should never forget that tweet, and we should always be pressing Paul Gosar, and hopefully in the next election that he runs in 2024, we can vote him out. And the last thing is, this caught my eye. So apparently flying taxis are now becoming a thing. There were pictures of these things flying in California, and this could just mark, I think, a new, really interesting wave of aviation innovation for a lot of young people. This, I think, really captures the imagination to see what the future of technology will be. And this might be the future, but we'll see. I know these things are pretty expensive and it takes a lot to actually get these things up in the air. But I think that it's interesting that we're already starting to see these flying taxis in the air. That is all for me today. I hope you enjoy this episode with Jen Taub. There's really no one better to explain the news of the day and what's going on with the former president and all the investigations into him. I hope, again, you'll check out her new podcast, and you'll come back tomorrow for a new episode of On the Move. It'll be with the one and only, I guess, the two and only Rachel Vindman and Alex Vindman. They're going to talk about all things Russia, what's going on. It'll be a great episode because, after all, like Alex Vindman said in his first impeachment, here right matters. And so we'll get into all of that with them tomorrow. Hope you'll be back tomorrow at 8 a.m. Pacific time, 11 a.m. Eastern time. And in the meantime, feel free to like this video, subscribe to youtube.com/Politicon, and click the bell for a weekly notification so you don't miss a single episode. Thanks so much, and I will see you tomorrow.